Hello, I'm Alex. I'm 24, live just outside Sacramento, and work part-time doing small electrical jobs while finishing my degree in engineering. I've been doing this for a couple of years now, ever since I started realizing I didn't want a regular office life like most of my classmates. This summer I stayed around town instead of going home. I took on odd jobs for neighbors, family, friends, anyone who needed something fixed. Wiring, lighting, small residential stuff. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and I liked working with my hands. It's simple, honest. Most days I didn't miss the chaos of college life. That Tuesday started out like any other. I was halfway through organizing my toolbox when I got a text from Mrs. Thompson, the mom of my best friend, Jordan. I'd known her since high school, had been in and out of their house for years. She was always kind, soft-spoken, rarely said much unless it mattered. She wrote, "Hi, Alex. Sorry to bother. Jordan said you've gotten good with electrical stuff. The dryer's been tripping the breaker again. If you're around, would you mind taking a look?" It didn't feel like a big ask. I told her I'd be over in an hour. Her house was just like I remembered. Two-story, pale green with white trim, a little weathered but well cared for, the kind of place where everything felt lived in, not worn out. When she opened the door, she gave me a familiar, quiet smile, the same kind I'd seen a dozen times over the years when dropping by to pick up Jordan. "Hey, Alex," she said. "Thanks for coming by." "No problem at all," I said. "Happy to help." She stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come on in." As I stepped inside, she glanced at me a bit more thoughtfully. "You're looking older," she said. "Grown into your face a little." I laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." She smiled. "How's school and everything else?" "It's all right," I said. "Final year. Just trying to keep my head on straight until May. Still doing the electrical work." "Yeah," I nodded. "Pays better than tutoring and I actually enjoy it." She nodded once. Not just polite acknowledgement, but the kind that meant she really heard it. "Good. I always liked that you were good with your hands. Quiet type, too. That's rare." Then, as if remembering why I was there, she turned slightly and gestured down the hall. "Basement's this way, panels to the right, the dryer's acting up." I followed her. The house smelled like fresh laundry and cedar. Clean, lived in, familiar. The kind of silence that didn't feel accidental, like it had been chosen. The basement was finished but barely furnished, a couch pushed up against the wall, some boxes, a dusty lamp. The electrical panel was older than I liked, but manageable. She stood by the stairs as I started checking breakers and inspecting connections. I could feel her eyes on me the entire time, just standing there, arms crossed, not saying anything. Not in a weird way, just watching like she was thinking about something else, but needed to keep me in her frame to stay anchored. I focused on the panel, replaced a corroded breaker, checked voltage, tested the dryer outlet. It took me about 25 minutes total. She didn't move, not once. When I finished, I turned to her. "You should be good now. The dryer was overloading the line because of this old breaker. It was basically cooked." She looked at me for a second, then nodded slowly. "You're probably seeing someone, aren't you?" The question hit me sideways. I blinked. "Oh no, not anymore." She didn't react much, just a faint smile like she already knew. "Makes sense," she said, then turned, walked back upstairs. I followed, still unsure what that meant. At the door, she handed me a small envelope. I didn't open it, just felt the cash inside. "You did good work," she said. "Thanks, Alex." "No problem. Call me if anything else acts up." She didn't respond, just stood there. I nodded, stepped off the porch and got in my truck. The whole way home, I kept replaying that moment, her voice, the look on her face. "You're probably seeing someone, aren't you?" It wasn't flirtatious, it wasn't awkward, it was something else, a soft, honest observation like she was trying to understand something about me or maybe about herself. I don't know why, but I kept thinking about it and about her. It was 3 days later when my phone buzzed again. I was elbow deep in rewiring an older couple's kitchen across town and didn't recognize the number at first, but something told me to check it. The message was short, almost casual. "The backyard lights are acting strange again. If you're free, take a look." It was signed Sarah. I read it twice. I wasn't sure I'd hear from her again. Most people think you pay and move on, but Sarah wasn't most people. She'd known me for years. I'd been in and out of that house 100 times growing up, but we'd never really talked. Not like that afternoon. The way she watched me work, that question, the way she said, "Makes sense." Like she'd known the answer before she asked. I finished up the job I was working on, texted her that I could come by after lunch. She replied within a minute, "I'll be home." When I pulled up to the house, it looked the same, but something about it felt different. Maybe because I was alone this time without Jordan around. Maybe because I knew she'd be waiting. She met me at the side gate holding a mason jar of lemonade. Her hair was tied up messily, a few strands falling around her face, no shoes again. Just relaxed jeans and a loose t-shirt. "Hey," she said, handing me the drink. "Still hot out here?" "Thanks," I said, taking a sip. "So, what's the issue?" She led me to the far end of the yard where a line of pathway lights ran along the hedge. One of them was flickering like a dying firefly. The others were out. "This one's been twitchy since last night," she said, crouching nearby as I knelt to check the wiring. "Could be a transformer issue," I murmured, "or bad line insulation underground. I'll need to dig a little." She nodded. "Whatever it is, no rush." She stayed nearby while I worked, sipping her lemonade, eyes drifting between the hedge and me. Unlike before, there wasn't that guarded distance in her body. She seemed more settled, still quiet but present. "You always work solo?" she asked eventually. "Most of the time," I said, glancing up. "Clients don't like paying for an extra set of hands when one gets it done." She smiled faintly. "Still sounds lonely." "It can be," I admitted, "but some quiet's good. Depends on the kind." She tilted her head at that, considering something. I used to think that too, then the quiet started echoing. I didn't know how to respond, so I kept busy. I checked the junction, replaced a length of corroded wire. The work kept me grounded. After a while, she asked, "Still staying at your uncle's place this summer?" I nodded. "Yeah, until I find something more permanent after graduation." "Jordan's out of town this week visiting his dad." She hummed softly. "Figured. The house feels different without him." When I stood to stretch, brushing dirt from my palms, she was looking at me. "You've changed," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" She laughed. "No, just quieter, more centered." "College does that to you?" I said, only half joking. Or maybe it was all the burnout professors. She handed me the lemonade again, and for a second our fingers touched around the glass, just a second, but long enough. We went back inside so I could wash up. Her kitchen was warm with the smell of cinnamon. "I baked banana bread," she said almost sheepishly. I smiled. You knew I couldn't say no. We sat at the kitchen island like we had years ago when Jordan and I would come back from school. But this wasn't the same. There was no Jordan, no loud music upstairs, just us in soft jazz playing from a speaker tucked in the corner. "You like what you're doing?" she asked after a while. "Yeah," I said. "It's simple. Feels good to fix things." She looked at me and then away. "I envy that. Editing books isn't fixing things." She smiled. "It's cutting things apart and hoping they still make sense when you're done. Not always the same." There was a moment, then a pause that wasn't awkward, just weighty. She picked at a crumb on her plate. "I'm glad it was you who came by the other day," she said. I looked up. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because you didn't fill the space with noise. You listened and you saw things I didn't think anyone would notice." My chest tightened at that. I didn't know what to say, so I just said the truth. "I think I've always noticed you. I just didn't know how to look." She didn't speak, just nodded, and then she stood to gather our plates. Before I left, she said, "I might need help with the garage light soon." "I'll be around," I replied. And as I walked to my truck, I realized the way she looked at me had changed, and maybe so had the way I looked at her. It started with a voicemail. I had just wrapped up a long job at a ranch outside town, a rewiring project that left me coated in dust and the smell of hay. I was halfway through unloading my truck when I noticed the missed call. It was from Sarah. She'd never called before, always just texted. Her voice when I played the message was calm, familiar in its steadiness but subtler than usual. "Hey, it's Sarah. I was thinking if you're not working this Sunday, maybe you'd come by for lunch. Just to thank you, no pressure." I replayed it twice, then again. I didn't answer right away. I sat with it, thought about the way she'd been during the last visit, the banana bread, the quiet glances, the way she looked at me just a little longer than she used to. We weren't strangers. She'd known me since high school, had watched me come and go from her kitchen more times than she could count. But back then, I was just Jordan's friend, just a polite teenager who used her driveway as a basketball court. Now, though, there was a difference neither of us could deny. That Sunday, I put on a clean dark t-shirt, worn jeans, nothing that screamed occasion, but not just another job call outfit either. I stopped by a local market and picked up a bottle of sparkling apple cider. Figured it was polite to show up with something, even if she insisted it was just lunch. She opened the door before I could knock, like she'd been waiting. "Hey," she said, her voice light but not nervous. She wore a soft blue blouse tucked into white pants, hair tied up loosely, barefoot again. "You're early." Traffic was kinder than usual. I smiled. "Didn't want to be late." She stepped aside. "Come on in." The house smelled like lemon and rosemary, something baked, something simmering. She gestured toward the back patio. The table was already set. White plates, linen napkins, real glasses. She'd gone out of her way, and I could tell she wasn't the type to do that for just anyone. "Hope you're okay with salmon," she said, pouring water into both glasses. "I'm more than okay," I said. "Looks great." We sat under the awning. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, scattering gold across the table. For the first few minutes, we talked about food, cooking habits, favorite recipes, how she hadn't ordered takeout in years. "I like knowing what's in front of me," she said. "There's something comforting about being the one in control of what you consume." I nodded. "I get that. I think that's why I like fixing things. Tangible outcomes, no guesswork." The conversation shifted slowly. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever think about going back to who you were before things changed?" "I thought about it," I said. "Not really. That guy feels like a different person. I think I left him behind for a reason." She smiled softly. "I know that feeling." Her tone wasn't sad, just aware. After we cleared the plates, she asked if I could help move a couple of boxes to the garage. "Been putting it off for weeks," she said with a small smile. "Figured if I lured you with food, I could guilt you into helping." I followed her down the hall to the spare room. 2 boxes sat in the corner, taped shut, dusty. "What's in them?" I asked. She looked at them like they'd been waiting too long. "Photos?" She didn't elaborate. I didn't push. I lifted one box, waited while she grabbed the other, and followed her to the garage. The space was clean, organized, shelves lined with labeled bins and tools, a single workbench near the back. She pointed to a lower shelf. "Just over there." I set the box down, turned, and found her standing a few steps away, arms crossed. "I don't usually invite people over," she said. I nodded. I figured. "You're the first man to eat at that table since 2010. I didn't say anything, not out of discomfort, but because it felt important to let her say what she needed. I've had neighbors, family, some friends, but not like this. I took a careful step closer, not to cross a line, just to be present. "You don't owe me anything, Sarah, not lunch, not an explanation." "I know," she said. "That's why it mattered." Her gaze held mine, clear, tired, honest. I got used to the quiet. After a while, I started believing it was better that way. But then you started showing up. You didn't ask questions. You didn't crowd the silence. That's never been my style. That's why I noticed. We stood there in the stillness of the garage, two people who'd been circling something unnamed. "I should probably head out," I said finally. "You don't have to." "I know," I said, "but I should." She walked me to the door. As I stepped onto the porch, she said softly, "The attic light's been acting up. Let me know if you ever feel like looking at it." I paused, turned back. "I'm around." She nodded once, didn't smile, didn't close the door. She just watched me walk away. It had been 5 days since that Sunday afternoon, since lunch under the awning. The garage conversation and the silence that hung just long enough to change something between us. We hadn't spoken since. No texts, no calls. I told myself it was nothing, just a thank you meal, a favor repaid. Sarah had always been kind, like a second parent when we were kids. And maybe this was her way of keeping things even. But it hadn't felt even. Not with the way she watched me as I left. Not with the way her voice softened when she said I didn't have to go. That Thursday night, my phone buzzed. It was her. "I made too much tea, if you're around." No emojis, no punctuation, just that. I didn't change clothes, didn't overthink it. I grabbed my keys and headed out. Her house looked like it always did, dim from the front, golden light glowing through the back window. When I stepped onto the porch, she opened the door before I could knock again, like she'd been listening for me. She didn't say hi, just stepped back to let me in. The house was warm, not from the air but from her. The lights were low, one lamp on the counter, the kettle still steaming, two mugs set side by side. She wore a thick sweater, long sleeves pulled past her palms, and simple leggings, hair down, slightly curled at the ends. No shoes. "You came," she said softly. "You asked," I said. She handed me the full mug without another word. The tea was chamomile, I think, or something close, floral, calming. She led me to the living room. The music playing low from the stereo was something instrumental. Maybe piano. I didn't recognize it. She curled up in one corner of the couch, knees tucked under her. I sat at the other end, not too far, our knees close. We didn't speak at first, just drank, listened. After a few minutes, she looked over at me. "You remember that time you and Jordan tried to rewire the old speaker system in the garage?" I laughed into my cup. "We nearly fried the breaker panel. You both smelled like melted plastic for a week." She smiled, then turned a little more serious. "But you were always the careful one, even back then." I shrugged. "Jordan had the wild ideas. I just made sure we didn't die." "You still do that," she said. "You show up. You don't talk over people. You fix things quietly. I like when things work." I said. Her eyes met mine. Most people don't bother. There was a long pause. Then she asked, "You think this is weird?" I knew what she meant. Not the tea, not the visit. This. Us sitting like this, talking like this. "I think it's unexpected," I said, "but not weird." She didn't look away. "You're Jordan's age, his friend. I shouldn't even be having tea with you like this." "You're not having tea with Jordan's friend," I said, placing the mug down. "You're sitting with someone who's been in your life longer than you realized." That stopped her. I leaned slightly forward. "I'm not a kid anymore. And you're not someone I just would know through someone else. You're Sarah, and this doesn't feel wrong." She looked at her hands, twisted the sleeve of her sweater in her fingers. "I got used to being invisible," she said. "After everything with my ex, after Jordan moved out, the house got so quiet, people stopped coming around and I stopped expecting them to." "I never stopped noticing you," I said, "even when I didn't understand what I was feeling." She let out a breath, not a sigh, something softer. "You always had kind eyes," she whispered. "But tonight, you're looking at me like you see something I forgot was there." I moved closer, just enough for her to feel it, but not enough to pressure. "You don't have to explain anything," I said. "Not tonight." "But I want to," she said. Then very gently she reached out, her fingers brushing mine. It wasn't sudden, wasn't electric. It was human, warm, intimate. Her hand found mine, slow and steady. Our fingers linked in the quietest way. Neither of us looked down. I didn't kiss her, not yet, but my thumb ran lightly across her knuckle, and her breath hitched just barely. She looked at me then, open, vulnerable, and for the first time since I'd known her, truly known her, I felt like she had let me in, not into the house, into her. It had been 2 weeks since that night on the couch, since the tea, since the kiss that felt less like a spark and more like a return to something I didn't know I'd lost. Sarah and I didn't text much. That wasn't how she communicated, but we saw each other briefly, quietly. Sometimes it was a knock on the door. Sometimes she left something small on the porch when she knew I was working nearby. A paper bag with banana muffins, a folded note that just said, "You looked tired yesterday." It wasn't romantic in the way movies show. There were no declarations, no plans, but there was presence, consistency that mattered more. One afternoon she sent me a message, "And sundown looks soft tonight, the garden lights flickering again if you're out." It was the same tone she used when Jordan and I were younger. When she'd text me, tell him to call his grandmother or ask if he left his jacket in the laundry room, but now it was just for me. I didn't reply, I just showed up. She was already on the back patio, sitting in one of the woven chairs under the fading sky. Her feet were tucked under her, a soft cardigan over her shoulders. There was a second glass of iced tea waiting. She'd always remembered how I liked it, less sweet, with lemon. "You've been quiet," she said as I sat down. "You too," I replied. We watched the light shift around us, orange to pink to silver. The garden felt still, like even the plants were holding their breath. "I wasn't sure if we were supposed to talk about it," she said finally. "Were we?" I asked. She shook her head. "No one told us the rules, and maybe that's why it's worked." She looked down at her hands. "I think part of me." "But you've always been there," I said. "I just never looked the right way." Sarah let out a breath. Not heavy, not sweet, just released. "You remind me of who I used to be," she said, "before everything got quiet." "I don't want to remind you of the past," I said gently. She smiled. "You don't. You remind me that I still have a present." We didn't move closer, we didn't touch, but we didn't need to. There was a space between us, not distance, but recognition. I looked at the flickering garden light. "I could fix that," I said. She shook her head slowly. "Let it flicker tonight." I nodded. We sat in silence a while longer, both of us knowing something had shifted again. Not forward, not backward, but inward. As I got up to leave, she said, "Whatever this is, I'm not going to ask it to be more than it wants to be." "I wouldn't have come if I needed more," I said, and I wouldn't stay if it didn't feel real. She walked me to the gate, no hug, no kiss, but something stayed in the air as I walked away. Something unnamed but not unspoken. The story of Alex and Sarah imparts a deeply resonant life lesson. The most meaningful connections often bloom in the quiet, unassuming moments that carry unexpected weight. What began as a simple favor, fixing a dryer, unraveled into a bond built on shared senses, subtle glances, and genuine presence. Sarah's vulnerability, revealed through her quiet admissions of loneliness and Alex's attentive listening, highlight the power of seeing someone beyond their role or facade. Their story teaches us that true intimacy doesn't require grand gestures. It grows in the small intentional acts, like a glass of tea or a flickering light left unfixed, that speak louder than words. Yet it also underscores the complexity of such bonds, especially when they challenge societal norms or risk complicating existing relationships. Alex and Sarah's unspoken agreement to let their connection exist without forcing it into a defined space reminds us to embrace authenticity while respecting boundaries. This resonates with anyone who's felt a spark in an unexpected moment, urging us to cherish connections that make us feel alive, even if they remain undefined. Have you ever found a profound connection in a quiet, fleeting moment? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. If this touched your heart, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell to join our community. Let's keep exploring the beauty of life's subtle, transformative bonds together.